Hi there, my name is Jasmin Junge, also known as Kuschelärmel, and since I haven't uploaded to my YouTube channel in quite a while, and I am at some point having a guilty conscience, I thought that maybe I could do something a bit quicker than usual and just show you how I edited this photo of a rose to look this dreamy and rainbowy and colorful in general. So without further ado, let me show you the original. So these are all the layers that I added in Photoshop. This is how it came out of Lightroom, and this is the actual original. Now anything I'm going to show you in Lightroom you can also do in Camera Raw. This is Adobe Camera Raw. It will, if you have a RAW file in Bridge, you can open it with Camera Raw, even if you do not have Lightroom installed. You can also open regular JPEGs with Camera Raw, right click and then open in Camera Raw. The outcome though will probably be somewhat different because the depth of a RAW file is just completely different than a JPEG. So if you do not get the same exact saturated results, let's put it like this, then it's not because you're unable to work these sliders, it's probably because you're working from a JPEG and it will look different and you will need to tweak some other things to get more or less the same result. But now let me show you something in Lightroom actually, because what I wanted to show you today goes beyond just the few adjustments that I made. I wanted to show you the difference between two different possibilities of taking the photo in the beginning. So I took these two photos yesterday in Baden-Baden, which is in southwest Germany, and yesterday I was kind of lucky that there was not the midday sun burning down, not just because I turned red like a lobster, but also because you can see here the harsh shadows are not really so contrasty. If you have sunlight on this one, then these parts will come out almost black. Also, if you get a heavy shadow, then maybe half of a leaf will be in shadow and it will look sometimes super strange. So that kind of thing, it's always kind of nice to have not direct sunlight hitting your subject. So that's the one thing that I wanted to show you. And the other thing, you can see there's a difference between those two pictures. The left one was shot at f5.6 and the right one, where you can see here also the data, was shot at f11, which means basically that your depth of field, so the amount of blurriness in the picture, will be more in the left one and less in the right one. When you zoom in here, more or less at the same spot, you can see that the depth of the sharpness is a bit different, and especially here in the background you can see that these whiter blobs are here still more defined than here, and this is because here the depth of field is much wider, so the amount of sharpness that you will get is much wider. Now if you look at these leaves, you can see that here, even though this is not so much further back than the rose itself, you can see here a good deal of blurriness. And here you can see that it does get a bit more blurry, but also you can still see those edges. From an aesthetic point of view, I would always take the left one, because you can see that the background is much less distracting. You have a much nicer focus on the rows, not focus in the sense of it being sharp, but focus in the sense of the object standing out from the background. It's not so busy here. You can see that all these details, it really distracts you here. All of these details, you do not really need those. Why I anyway always try to take one picture with a low and one with a high aperture is to have one that I can use as print file or as an artistic endeavor, let's put it like that, and one where I do not take into account much about the composition. Here you can also see the composition is a bit more to the left, which cuts off this leaf, but it also means that the whole rose goes more into the middle, and it's a nicer, more balanced composition. Here it feels like the rose is kind of falling off to the side. I don't know. It's, in any case, it feels a bit off. But what you can see here is that here I have all of the leaves in the picture, all of the leaves more or less in focus. So if I were to use this as a stock PNG image and not just in combination with the same background, because what you will also have if you try to cut this is this problem of, do I keep those soft backs or not? Usually I would say you don't, and then you need to cut off some of the blurry edge, but still you will not see the same sort of detail here in this leaf as in this one. And depending on how big you are going to have it in your final manip, you will definitely feel that this one might look off more than this one if you cut it out. Because you can always use the blur tool or a mask or something to blur part of the image to make it fit with whatever new background you want. But if it's already blurred, there is not much that you can do. You cannot bring back stuff that is blurry on the original photo, despite what the media likes us to believe. So this is what I wanted to show you in Lightroom, because it's nice to have this side-by-side comparison. If you are somebody who likes to photograph your own pictures, I highly recommend taking a look at it. I feel it's very intuitive and makes life so much easier when you do not have to open each raw file individually in Camera Raw. But of course, if you do not want or have this or don't have the need to, then you can always just use the Camera Raw. And now I want to show you what I did to get this look. Because yes, it's drastically different. So now we're in the Camera Raw, and the nice thing about this is if I close here everything, you can see that where there is a filled out eye and not grayed out like here, there are the items where I have changed something. So what I have actually done in Lightroom is use one of the presets, and my presets are available on my website. I will link below, also on DeviantArt. I will link them below if you want those as a starting point. But what I always do, if I like one of those, I take it and then I still adjust anything else that I might feel the need to. So I would very much like to just permanently get rid of this, but the dumb thing with my German keyboard is that some of the shortcuts do not work, so I cannot do this. But what I can do is I can show you by clicking on this eye that the most oomph or the biggest change actually comes from the calibration window. So here you can see that the shadows are all the way to 100. All of these are normally in the middle at 0, and I have change these drastically. And this is how you get this strange color correction. I think I have also talked about this in my camera raw video if you need some more pointers or some more details. Then what also makes a difference, but not so much, is this color mixer, where I really like to change specific hues. And if you go to this target tool and you go over it and you hold, and then you can change this to your heart's desire. I'm just going to undo this. And what is also of course of much importance is the basics. Here you can see if you just drop the color grading onto the file without changing any of the exposure, contrast, highlight settings, it might look kind of different, and most of this difference comes here from this temperature. So if you start changing something and you see that it goes in the right direction, switch between the color between the calibration window and this basic window back and forth, so that you can check what an influence the temperature and also the tint have on the outcome. So you can see here that it can be very drastic. And this, the exposure, of course, I tend to underexpose my images rather than overexpose them, because Camera Raw can deal with the darks much better than with the lights. And if you have something overexposed, then it's blown out and it's usually not going to look very, very great. These sliders make this image pop. And then what I did was to take it into Photoshop and add different layers. For those of you who may not know 100% what that means, I'm going to turn these off. I'm going to show you layer by layer. So first, what I added was a gradient in, let's say, purple here in the bottom. I can put it on normal, and then you can see that it's, if I have it on the normal blend mode, it's just this slight coloration. What you can always do, if you do not know exactly which hue or tone you want to use, you choose first your blend mode. And for these types of things, I really like the hard light one. It makes colors pop so nicely. And then what you can do is hold down Control and U, which brings up the hue saturation dialog. And then you can just change the hue here until you find something that you like. You can not just change the hue, but you can also change the saturation. And you can change the lightness, brightness. So with this trick, you can get any look that you like, and you do not have to blindly guess which kind of color might make this happen. Because blend modes are a way for Photoshop to bring together the pixels on one layer with the pixels underneath. And each time you change the blend mode, you change how those pixels are added, subtracted, or in another way calculated to go on top. So it is sometimes very hard to see from the beginning what kind of hue you would like to have. So what I wanted is to get this down here a bit darker, because I want this rose to stand out, and this is more or less the same color, this as well. And so in order to make them blend more into the background and not distract from the rose in the front, on the actual rose, I added this one. So this goes basically from here, like this. For these things, I always use the gradient tool, with the gradient from reverse, so from transparent to whatever foreground color you pick, and you can, as I said, you can start with anything. And then next up, what I did was to add some yellow at the top. Again, I'm always using the hue saturation method, so this is not the first thing that I picked. And as you can see, this is much too light. I liked the kind of glow that it gave, but this, you can see, it's way too bright. So what I also did, what you also can do, is at first I thought I would just tone one corner. So if you add a hue saturation adjustment layer, you can find those here, hue saturation. Then you get a new one, and it's the same dialog as with the Control U, just that you have the option here to treat it as a layer, and anything that's below will be affected. And if you only want to affect the layer directly below, you alt click here in between and clip it. This is called clipping. And also here you can clip. So with this you can now change whatever the direction. So what I chose was this red, and as I said, at first I had here also a mask on, which was basically from transparent to black about here. I just wanted to darken the corner, and I had this in a different color also, but it did not really work out. You can see it's much too bright. So if you hold down Shift and click on the thumbnail of the mask, you can get rid of the effect of the mask without getting rid of the mask itself. So you can check what it would look like without. And for me, this was really good. Then what I also wanted was a bit more other colors here, maybe here. So I started another hard light layer in light blue here on the side, and another one, I think I just duplicated that one. And if you're not quite sure how or where to put it, you always have two options, I find. So you can add a new layer with this plus sign, and then you go to your gradient, and you choose the gradient and you set it to hard light, and then you try your luck with the hue saturation box however you like. And if you see that this linear gradient just looks a bit off, the other thing that you can do is to change to a radial gradient. Then I would always uncheck the reverse box, and then you can draw a radial gradient. I'm always then trying not to hit the edges. So this way, when I Control T, transform, then I can have this blob of light that I can just move around. So when you set this to hard light, Control I inverts, so we see a bit more. So then you can just take this and take it wherever you like it, and then see, I like the light, the brightness, but I do not like the color. I do like the color, but I do not like the brightness. And with hard light you can get some really strange, cool color effects here. You can see this is really extreme. So these are the two main options I find, a radial gradient or a linear gradient. And this one I put on reverse. It's just, you can also keep it on not reverse, of course. There is no right or wrong way to use Photoshop. Please remember that. There's just a way that makes more sense for you and one that doesn't. And yeah, for me, reversing my gradients is just something I've done for years, so old dog, new tricks, not going to happen. So the next one that I have added is a color balance layer, and you can see it's kind of subtle. You can see here in the properties panel, I always start with the highlights, and there I added some more yellow, and the more yellow you add, the more you make it here kind of pop. And you can also change the shadows and of course the midtones. And this color balance, I'm just going to show you on a new layer. It's also down here in the adjustment layers, color balance. This can change the look of your image very, very drastically. So if you do something like this, and then your highlights to yellow, this is, I mean, yes, you need to figure out if you really wanted this pronounced. So for now I'm going to stick with the original version. What is also a tip that I have learned from lots of YouTube videos is, and from color theory actually, is if you put your highlights more yellow, then try putting your shadows more blue. And this goes for all of these, but with yellow and blue it's super pronounced. Having cool shadows and warm highlights, or the other way around, it can really give a bit of dynamic and liveliness to your images that otherwise would be kind of hard to achieve. And I think this is part of this subtle difference, is the more yellows here in the highlights and a bit more I think reds and blues in the shadows. So I think this just pops really nicely. What I have then found is that now this part is super light, this is super light. So if you go to hue saturation and just turn down the saturation, you can see that this is, why does it do this? Yes, probably because the hue saturation is not the, oops, that's wrong, not the nicest thing to get actually a black and white image. This is mostly better. Here you can actually go in and change each of the channels. But yeah, it's still, depending on what you want, this might be a bit jarring. So with those harsh edges and so on, and with this super brightness here and back there, and then the yellow always seems bright, but it still doesn't seem like it can really compete. So I'm adding a curves adjustment, and I'm showing you without the mask first. So what I wanted here was to boost some of the highlights here and get a bit more contrast in. So with such an S curve you can get some more contrast. When you do a new curves layer, you can just see that you can drag this and add points wherever you like, and then you can make it as pronounced or subtle as you like. And at first I thought I might just tone down everything here, but then I ended up making this part a bit more contrasty and saturated, and I think this helps a lot. And then lastly, what I have done is to add this dark red corner set to multiply. Multiply makes everything a bit darker, because I did not want this uniform red up here, and give it a bit more contrast with this. But this was more or less what I have done. At the moment I'm pondering if it needs some more shadows on the side. We can try maybe quickly with a new curves layer and taking this down. And if you change these endpoints, you can get the overall contrast also down. So this is the very bright spots where you would just change them downward and make them less bright. Similarly, you can add brightness in the darks, which for some washed out looks is kind of nice. And you can here go into the red, green and blue channels and do the same on any of the individual channels. So if I increase the blue here, you can see that this is this gives a very saturated, dreamy look. And here you can bring down the blue in top, and this is some sort of dual toning. Back in the old days, they would do this by developing film with a different developing agent than it was made for, and then you'd get some of those strange colors. So maybe I like this better. I don't know. I think I like the red one better. It's hard sometimes, and this is where it can take me ages. I think this is kind of nice, huh? This is why it takes me ages to fiddle with a simple photograph and add a few simple layers. So now I can put all of these again in the group. If you want a new group, you can go Control and G and it will add a group, or you can also just use this folder icon down here and add a group. Then you can put everything in, and then you can toggle it on and off. And then you can also see, if you toggle this on and off, what happens if you had done this on the original image, which is still kind of cool. So no matter what your what your starting point might be, I hope that you found some of these tips useful, that you like this rainbowy rose image, because I'm going to upload it to Instagram. I hope to see you around, and not again in only half a year. I am still trying to figure out how to do the photo manips for beginners videos, but I'm kind of stuck at the moment. It feels like so overwhelming to just pick one aspect and to just talk about the workspace, for example. It feels so overwhelming. So if you have any particular things where you would like to have a bit more of a detailed look, maybe I could start with those and not try to do the whole massive program at once. Yeah, please leave a comment below if you have any ideas. And I hope this was not too disappointing after this long wait. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and see you around.